Let's continue then our series of analyses on all the mythological errors in God of War, this time going to my favorite, the God of War 3. Like, subscribe, share the video, and let's go.
We were forged in victory. A victory that ended the Great War and brought forth the reign of Mount Olympus.
We then start with Zeus's speech about how Mount Olympus was forged from chaos and that they created a world of peace and prosperity. Besides, in the game itself, at this moment, showing monsters attacking people, which might be an indication that Zeus is lying. In Greek mythology itself, in Exildo's works of day, it makes clear that Zeus's reign for humans was quite bad, because they had to work and also began to experience sadness, unlike the reign of Kronos, where happiness and prosperity truly reigned.
That power is to be tested. The mortal Kratos seeks to destroy all that I have wrought.
So let's go to the Titans, who were climbing Mount Olympus in a way very similar to Typhoon, and now let's see about each of them and talk quickly about them. The one that appears from the back there is the first. It's Hyperion, who in mythology is the god of celestial light, the father of Eos, the dawn, of Helios, the sun, and also of Selene, which is the moon. His wife was Thea, the lady of the ether, which is the bright blue of the sky. The next one in the climb that seems to be made of rays there is the Titan Oceanus, who, as his own name says, he personified what the Greeks called the river that surrounds the world. Interestingly, he was among the few in mythology who remained neutral during the Titanomachy. He didn't like fights, so much so that he didn't even help his brother Cronus in the fall of Uranus. If it was the mythological one, he wouldn't fight against Olympus again. The next Titan is Perseus, the Titan of destruction. In mythology, he fathered Hecate, goddess of witchcraft. His own name means the destroyer or the devastator.
Then comes Epimetheus, the brother of Prometheus, the same one who was punished by Zeus, as we saw in the analysis of God of War 2. Interestingly, in the game, the two brothers are quite different from each other. Prometheus has a more human look, and Epimetheus follows the logic of the stone beasts. Speaking of stone, the last one that appears is Gaia. And yes, it makes sense that she is a revolutionary or the mastermind behind this conquest. In fact, it wasn't the first time. Before that, she had already helped to overthrow Uranus, Kronos, and even Zeus. But she is not a Titan in Greek myths. She is much more than that, a primordial entity, and perhaps for this reason, she never directly involved herself in the wars. And then finally our friends up there on Olympus. We're still going to talk a lot about them in this video, but right off the bat, yes, Helios' presence instead of Apollo catches my attention, as well as the presence of Hades, who is not an Olympian god. He is a Chthonic god, a god of the Underworld. By the way, I also really want to know where Artemis is in this whole thing.
Hercules helping Mount Olympus makes sense as he became an Olympian after the 12 labors. Helios saying the Titans will fail again suggests he may be an Olympian, not a Titan, though it's unclear how this is portrayed in the game.
The Titans will fail again.
But in mythology, Helios is indeed a Titan, being the sun itself. And in the Titanomachy War, he did not participate on any side, even being spared by Zeus and not thrown into Tartarus. So after we kill some of Zeus's boys, it cuts to a scene of Epimetheus throwing a rock at Olympus. And then Poseidon appears, who curiously has some body paintings that remind me a lot of Celtic gods. Apart from these paintings and his beard, which is quite small. His appearance isn't that wrong. The trident appears soon. He jumps from Olympus and delivers a fatal blow to Epimetheus in a tough scene. Then the Hippocampus appears, which are the monsters that end up trapping Gaia. They made a really cool reference in this part. Because remember at the beginning, when Poseidon appears, he has a creature on his arm? That one is also a hippocampus, which later becomes giant. The ancients believed that a hippocampus, in fact, was the adult form of the seahorse. And still in mythology, the hippocampi were mounts of the Nereid nymphs and also of the sea gods. Poseidon, in fact, drove a chariot that was pulled by 2 or 4 of these creatures. They are not giants like in the game, and they don't have enough strength to hold a titan like that, but the design turned out really cool. Then there, while Kratos is climbing, we see Hades pulling the ocean without much effort. Gaia grabs again by the hippocampus, and we see the image of 2 statues that appear to be 2 griffins. Further ahead, we have this beautiful image of Perseus getting a beating from Aaron. So Kratos arrives at the tomb of Ares, who was the boss back in Gravorum, the first to die at the hands of the bald guy who is still kind of frozen there. And well preserved on top of that. It's hard to evaluate this scene because the gods of mythology never die. So it's hard to know what would happen to their bodies.
Meanwhile, Gaia is there struggling in the fight against Poseidon's corsairs. The cool thing is that in Greek mythology, the 2 of them even had an affair. It was from this relationship that the giant Antaeus and also Charybdis, that monster, were born. After helping Gaia with the Hippocampus, Kratos takes a stroll inside the body of the goddess of war. And Greek myths are full of references about her interior, the depths of Gaia. Almost always referring to the depths of the world itself, caves and such. In one of the versions of the story of Zeus's growth, it is said that Gaia hid him there, inside a cave. Which in theory means that she hid him within herself. By the way, there is no mythological reference about Gaia's heart.
A true warrior does not hide, Poseidon.
And then finally, Poseidon's figure emerges. Emerging there from the sea, ready to face Clayton, and here he appears in his divine form, all covered by the waters gigantic. Another very cool detail are the water steeds that project there under him, water horses that refer to the chariot pulled by the Hippocampus. Another detail I noticed is that he is wearing a crown of crab claws there. It's a detail that reminds me of the ocean titan that appears in Roman mosaics with crab claws on his head. It wasn't really a crown, it was more like horns, but it's worth it. By the way, on my channel I did a complete analysis of Poseidon's look. Search Poseidon God of War after you finish here and you'll find the video. So Kratos manages to expel Poseidon from his divine form. And there, vulnerable, he ends up dying. Once again, no equal the golden blood of the gods. In God of War, the gods bleed real blood, red just like ours. Without Poseidon to keep the waters under control, the sea invades the coast and the cities. It gets out of control. It makes sense if we consider that Poseidon was the lord of the seas. But like this, in Greek myths, the gods do not die, so as long as there was sea, there would be Poseidon.
What will you do, Father? You can no longer hide behind the skirts of...
So Kratos met his dad for the first time in the game, where in the middle of a conversation there, Zeus says that Kratos could not against him. And Kratos in turn says that neither death nor even the Sisters of Fate could stop him. And then we have the first confrontation against the Lord of Olympus, and the now outside Zeus is very well done. He has a white beard, and even though he's older, you can still see that he's very strong. In addition to being extremely imposing, the only difference is that in mythology he has a black beard and not a white one. And there in the scene we also see Zeus conjuring the lightning directly from the clouds. In the case of mythology, the lightning itself is a weapon forged by the Cyclops, which they give to Zeus and he throws. Well, Gaia then tries to slap Zeus, but it doesn't work out very well. He nearly destroys Gaia's arm, and she and Kratos are thrown out of Olympus. During this fall, Kratos asks for help from Gaia, who says she wouldn't help because all of this was her business, the Titans against the gods, and Kratos had nothing to do with it. Kind of revealing the trickery she had. Gaia in mythology often does this kind of thing when she gave the strength to Kronos to castrate Uranus, when she took care of Zeus so that he could dethrone Kronos, and now she was doing the same thing with Kratos. In fact, she also created Typhon to try to dethrone Zeus in mythology. Kratos falls into the river Styx because in the fall of Olympus he ended up going base. In fact, I hadn't noticed this until now. Entering the realm of Hades, he ends up meeting Athena again in her most ghostly form. And the river Styx, or Styx in English, really is the river of the underworld in mythology, receiving this name because of the deity that represents it, which has the same name. Styx is the name of the oldest of the Oceanids. She was also the spirit that is a daemon, the personification of hatred, and is the mother of the mythological Kratos. So you can say that Cleton ended up falling into the arms of the mother.
Zeus will not fall as easily as Ares. To destroy the king of the gods, you must seek the source of his strength, the fire of Olympus.
In the middle of the conversation with Athena, she tells Kratos that in order to kill Zeus, he would need the flame of Olympus. How can one not remember the myth of Prometheus, where he steals a bit of the fire from the gods to bring to humanity? And she also says that as long as Zeus lives, there is no hope for men, which also reminds us of the works of Exile, which says that at a certain point, Zeus will actually destroy all men, all of humanity. Including in my video about Apocalypse, I talk in a much more complete way about this story. This part of the underworld
is very different from what we saw in the first game, maybe because it's the deepest part of the kingdom. Interestingly, it's also the least bizarre, and there's even a random Gorgon there out of nowhere. By the way, the Gorgons didn't have a snake body like that. It was just the hair. The body was normal, with legs. They even had wings too. It's good to remember that a certain giant three-headed dog was missing here, but other brains appear throughout the franchise, right? As if here they were a race and not a specific monster.
Hades, he sentenced me to this eternal torture.
My prison.
Of Pandora.
It's also cool, this appearance of Pirito. This story really exists in mythology, right? In this case, he and Theseus kind of made a pact to get the most beautiful women in all of Greece. One of them would be Helen, and the other simply Persephone, Hades' wife. Then the crazy guys had the audacity to descend into the underworld, but let's just say it didn't go very well. But also, right?
What a shitty idea. Quartus keeps walking until he reaches a part with 3 giant statues holding a chain. These are the 3 judges of the underworld who judge souls under the supervision of Hades himself. They are Minos, Ikos, and Rhadamanthus. In some parts of the underworld, we see some lost souls wandering aimlessly. In Greek mythology, this happens to those who have died, but were not buried correctly and without Charon's coin in their mouth. Without the coin, they end up not paying the ferryman and wander like lost ghosts on the edges of the underworld river.
I have paid the price. So, ghosts of Spartan,
We've arrived at the forge of Hephaestus, the blacksmith of the gods, Hephaestus is imprisoned down there for some reason we still don't know. Out of curiosity, Hephaestus's forge was never in the Underworld, but it could be located in 3 places. On Mount Etna in Lemnos, but it was usually on Mount Olympus.
It's really cool that Persephone's coffin also appears queen and goddess of the underworld. And by the way, it's even funny to imagine that the goddess of the dead is also dead. But it makes sense within the context of the game. You have committed many sins against me.
And what else? What else?
So? I will see you suffer as I have suffered.
And then finally Hades comes. I've talked too much about Hades on my channel these days. The Hades from Record of Ragnarok, the Hades from Percy Jackson, and also this Hades, the Hades from God of War. And he has a very bizarre look, very different from his brothers and very different from his look in the Greek images. There he was just a guy with a black beard. Here he is a monster. He has the helmet, which is part of the myths. It can make him invisible. And he also has these chains, this weapon he uses to suck, to absorb people's souls. It's a very cool idea, and it makes sense when we think about the figure of Hades, but it's not part of Greek mythology. Actually, this business of collecting souls was not his thing. In fact, you could say that in the Underworld, Hades would be practically invincible. But this is another universe, and in this universe, everyone gets beaten up by Kratos, who steals Hades' weapon and even absorbs his soul. With the death of Hades, the souls of the Underworld are kind of lost, not knowing where to go. In fact, many of them flee and escape from the Underworld. Kratos was na kwa konwo.
Does this mean that Lord Hades no longer rules?
So we return to the forge again, and Hephaestus begins to tell the story of how he ended up there. He says that he was once very well regarded on Olympus, and even married Aphrodite because of it. It's a story quite faithful to mythology, where he ends up marrying Aphrodite after freeing Hera from a trap he had set for her. All because of revenge, because his mother despised him so much, and even threw him from Mount Olympus. But in the game, after Quartus killed Ares, Hephaestus ended up suffering at the hands of Zeus. He even had his daughter Pandora taken by the Lord of Olympus. Indeed, Hephaestus created Pandora in mythology under Zeus's command, with the help of other gods to take revenge on humanity, after Prometheus ended up stealing the fire. And the fight of the Titan Perseus against Helios continues, chariot and all. As I mentioned, in Greek mythology, Helios represents the sun. However, the game seems to portray it differently. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but behind the fight of Perseus and Helios, it seems like there's a sun there. Right after that, following the tradition of carrying decapitated heads, Kratos not only lays Helios down hard, but also ends up taking his head afterwards. In one of the franchise's most brutal deaths, featured in my video of gods who suffered the most at Kratos' hands, which will be on the card and in the description for you. With the death of Helios, the sun goes out and the world falls into darkness. The good thing is that now Kratos had a hell of a lantern. In fact, in Greek myths, the figure of Helios kind of faded over time. Gradually, he ended up being replaced by Apollo, and then Helios ended up becoming a secondary figure, especially from Aeschylus onwards. And although Apollo appears in some games, like for example in God of War Ascension, he physically never appeared, and Helios ended up taking over his role in the game. And not satisfied with ending Helios, Perseus also goes base in Kratos' hand. This death is family related because Perseus is the brother of Pallas, the father of the mythological Kratos.
Look who it is, Kratos, the ghost of Sparta. This Hermes.
This Hermes really looks like Hermes. He's young, slim, fast, has the winged boots and the rascal demeanor. The caduceus is missing, but it appears represented there as if it were a brooch on his chest. I also didn't understand the fire hair, right? In Greek myths, Hermes usually appears with a little hat, which may or may not also have wings. Stood?
That the evils born from that battle, if left free, would destroy the world of man and gods. To contain these evils, Zeus commissioned Hephaestus to build a vessel strong enough to hold them. He sealed them in a box with the hope that they would never again infect his kingdom.
No, that's not what happened in Greek myths. Zeus did not imprison the evils of the world in Pandora's box so that it would never be opened again. On the contrary, it was created just to be opened. It was all part of his plan. From the creation of Pandora to the box she carried, the marriage to Epimetheus, the temptation of the box, all of this was done so that the box would be opened. It was Zeus's little way of getting revenge. Hermes' winged sandals had wings for a reason, right? He could fly with them, but it seems that the Hermes from God of War doesn't have this ability. He just runs, and at least he's pretty fast. At the time, I didn't quite understand what happens here after Hermes dies, but it's later explained that his body dissolved into a swarm of disease-carrying flies, which spread a real plague upon humanity. Alright, but why? Hermes wasn't the god of healing or anything like that for his death to signify disease. That should be Asclepius, who also has a staff, but they are different staffs. There he is. Moreover, Hermes is a psychopomp god, so he is much closer to death than to healing.
Just in time for the final act.
Hera?
The goddess Hera is quite strange and seems to be a shrew in God of War, and apparently she hates all of Zeus's bastard children, which is correct. It's worth noting that Hera's portrayal in the game differs from mythology, where she is considered one of the most beautiful goddesses. In a dispute with Athena and Aphrodite, Hera is described as the most beautiful of the three, and she seems to have a certain power over Heracles, who in the game is called Hercules, which is the Roman name. It seems very clear to me that they ended up using the Greek name of the character, largely because of the Disney movie. It would have been cool to see his Greek name. In Greek myths,
Hera
and Hercules really hated each other. In fact, much of the story is the result of Hera's pure disdain for him. So fighting for the goddess Hera as if he were her champion is somewhat ironic, but it's also fitting. Because if you consider the name Heracles, the character's Greek name, and translate it, it would be Glory of Hera. So it ends up fitting. You may also remember that after becoming a god, they kind of made peace, and Heracles even married a daughter of the goddess Hera, the goddess of youth, Hebe.
You've always been Zeus's favorite. The air in Olympia affects your pension, brother.
Zeus is not the favorite. So you're saying the all-powerful Hercules is jealous of Kratos? He thinks Zeus is favoring one son over the other. I think he forgot the part where Zeus literally tried to kill Kratos, and more than once. Not to mention, everyone knows that Zeus's favorite daughter was Athena.
Think about it, brother. While I was cleaning the Augean stables, he chose you to destroy Ares.
It wasn't Zeus who sent Hercules to clean the Augean stables or steal the apples of the Hesperides. It was his cousin, Eurystheus, who sent him to do these and the other tasks, the famous labors of Hercules. So it doesn't make much sense for him to throw these things at Kratos. Zeus had nothing to do with this, it's all Hera's fault.
Perhaps he did allow me to kill the Nemean lion, but he made your name known amongst the people. A fierce war, a hero made, a man made a god.
The funny thing is that everything Hercules said could also apply to himself. He was also well known and famous. He was also a powerful warrior and a killer-turned-hero, a man who became a god. In fact, Kratos' story is much more similar to Hercules' story than to the mythological Kratos. Interestingly, Hercules' weapons in the game are the Nemean roars, which is an obvious reference to his first job in mythology, killing the Nemean lion. So the half-brothers fight goes on. Kratos takes Hercules' gloves until Hercules lifts the arena floor, and let's just say he takes several punches to the face and goes down. And then we get to the part with Aphrodite, which of course I can't show much of here because YouTube would get mad. Aphrodite is well depicted using her charm to resolve matters, and this instance is no exception. In mythology, she is married to Hephaestus, but has an affair with Ares. The situation appears similar in Gorophorn. According to Hephaestus, you might find Aphrodite's belt behind her bed, an additional curiosity, which in mythology she uses to further enhance her beauty. So we again find Hephaestus, who, just by seeing Kratos, imagine what happened on the other side.
That is a question you should
ask your wife, if you know what I mean. But incredibly, Hephaestus doesn't even get mad about it. He really freaks out when he sees that Kratos is after Pandora, and he even tells her whole story, which is quite interesting, much cooler than just being given to humanity as a plan of Zeus's revenge on Prometheus.
The evils of the Great War cannot easily be contained. I forged the box in a power greater than the gods themselves. As the raw metal took shape, I realized the flame was the safest place to protect it. All that was needed was a key, a way to retrieve the box. Created from the very heart of the flame, the key to corner life of its own.
The Stone of On said that Hephaestus needs to make a new weapon. Nothing more is than that stone that Rhea gave to Kronos to swallow in place of Zeus. And yes, it is also part of Greek mythology, and there even has a deeper meaning, as if it were the navel of the world, the center of everything. To retrieve the stone, Kratos has to go after Kronos, who is now in the right place, Tartarus. If it were in Greek mythology, he would have to face the Hecatonkeiris before reaching Grandfather. But here he faces a chimera, which in Greek myths was defeated by Bellerophon and Pegasus. And after walking a bit, there is Kronos, Kratos' grandfather, father of Zeus. And of course, he wasn't happy to see Cleton there, right? Especially because of what he did to Gaia earlier. In addition, he was angry because after Pandora's box was opened, Kratos' fault, he was thrown there in Tartarus. He tries to crush his grandson as if he were a tick, and then he has the terrible idea, like really bad, of swallowing Kratos, who destroys Kronos from the inside out and manages to recover the stone.
Then Kratos returns to his friend, Hephaestus, who wasn't so much of a friend anymore, because it was more than obvious that Hephaestus was trying to get rid of Kratos. But either way, he makes the weapon he had promised and then desperately tries to get rid of the bald guy, but ends up going down as well. And to be honest, I did feel a bit sorry for Hephaestus. The guy was just trying to protect Pandora. But the weapon he had made, which was called the Whip of Nemesis, was a reference to the goddess of punishment, Nemesis herself. Then we get to the part about Hera's garden, which also exists in mythology. In this case, the place could also be called Hera's orchard, or the Garden of the Hesperides. And the Hesperides were daughters of Atlas, who were in charge of taking care of the golden orchard, which was given to Hera as a gift by Gaia on the day of her marriage to Zeus. But they never appeared in the God of War franchise.
I told him the day you were born to kill you. My stupid husband took pity. And now look what you have wrought!
The encounter with Hera is brief. She's intoxicated and prepared for the world's end, offering no resistance. Oddly, after her death, the surrounding plants and vegetation seem to wither, despite Hera not being a fertility goddess. Demeter, who never appeared in God of War, would be more fitting for that role. As the goddess of marriage, Hera's death could cause divorces at most, or perhaps just her garden's decay.
So, we finally get to the labyrinth, and no, Mount Olympus didn't have a labyrinth. The labyrinth that was built by Daedalus, that guy who appears there trapped, was built on the island of Crete at the behest of King Minos to imprison the Minotaur. And definitely it was not a giant cube, as cool as that may be. By the way, later Daedalus confuses Kratos with his son, who in this case is Icarus, the same one we saw die in God of War 2. And speaking of famous monsters, Scorpion also appears here, another one that has no relation to Olympus. In Greek myths, he got into a fight with Arion and ended up in the sky, immortalized as a constellation. And here in the game, he appears with ice powers instead of poison. He's the one who guards the key to the labyrinth, so quite different from the myths, but very cool. About Pandora, of course, they made several changes. For starters, Pandora was never a girl like that. She was created as an older woman, a beautiful adult woman, so that she could win Epimetheus' heart and marry him. And she didn't consider Hephaestus as her father, even though he was the name behind her creation. He and all the other gods, in fact, because they all contributed in some way, but the order came from Zeus. The whole plan that already involved the creation and Pandora's box came from him. By the way, the game gives much more importance to this figure, which I think is pretty cool actually. Of the adaptations they made, this is the one I like the most. Because in Greek myths, she is basically the woman who opens the box and releases the evils into humanity. And she has no deeper connection with the box, which was actually a jar. What she does is just open it, and that's it.
Has become somewhat of a nuisance, my son. Release the girl, Zeus!
And the battle with the gods is simply amazing. The camera switches to a fighting game style, reminiscent of Mortal Kombat. Zeus and Kratos exchange simultaneous blows. Pandora moves towards the flames of the box, and Kratos attempts to stop her. However, he ultimately allows her to proceed, as Zeus continues to distract and harass him. Then an explosion occurs, and Kratos sees that the box is apparently empty. Then the second round begins right where Kratos had faced Zeus for the first time, or at least tried on Olympus. Only this time, a third person appears in the fight. That is Gaia, who was alive, and very angry with Kratos for putting the world in chaos. She then decides to end Zeus and Kratos at the same moment. Only the two end up jumping inside her. And there, the last fight with Zeus occurs, with Kratos hitting him and Gaia's heart together, using the Blade of Olympus.
No!
The gods even return in a more spiritual form, but end up being defeated again. In the end, it's revealed that Athena sought to take all of Kratos' power for herself. With a sacrifice, Kratos releases all this power to the world. Then there's the post-credits scene that takes us to Goreford 2018 with the Norse gods. Do you think anything was missing from the analysis? Do you agree, disagree with it? Leave it in the comments. Remember to subscribe, share the video, and like it. Thanks. Bye. Thank you.